If you have questions about Bitcoin, about the future of America's economy, you're going to love today's episode. When I have questions, concerns, fears, frustrations, I go to my big brother, Matt Smith. He's not my real big brother, but he's my business partner at Early to Rise, the wisest guy that I know. And we're going to talk about some very controversial things. You're going to love this episode of Early to Rise Radio.
All right. Welcome, Matt Smith. Welcome back to the show.
Happy to be here, Craig.
This is going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to ask for some parenting advice in this new world. I'm going to ask for your thoughts on when Bitcoin is going to hit 500K, because I just heard a prediction from Bobby Casey, and I'm going to ask your ideas on how to remain optimistic in some weird and possibly pessimistic times, and then maybe what you've seen in your journeys across America this year. Sound good?
That works for me. Yeah, sounds fun.
All right, so let's start off with you tell us about the RV that you bought, where you've been, and what you've encountered along the way in terms of people that you've met and places that you've gone and things that you've seen, observations that you've made.
Yeah, so I realized that I've been doing this really since the pandemic started, as sort of self-isolating, not because I was worried about getting sick, but because I didn't want to deal with the hassle of the people and the masks and all that. So I really cut down my travel. I only went to one country last year. That was Colombia. And I did that because I was really thinking I needed to get out of my comfort zone, honestly. And had a great time. I had a lot of friends that lived there, so it was really nice. Then when we got back, though, we were just trying to think about planning more travel, and it's just like the rules are changing everywhere all the time. The flights, I don't like flying with the mask on. I think it's ridiculous. I think so. The idea was, if we get an RV, then we can basically go. There's a lot of places we can go. We don't really have anything else to do. We can go wherever we want. We'll always have our hotel room with us and our stuff with us, and we can basically, it'll just give us more options. And then it made imagining traveling seem easier, because it was like, you didn't have to worry about when, hotels being closed or having specific rules, or even one time we went to a really, really the nicest hotel in Tucson, and they eliminated all of their services. So like, they didn't have valet, they didn't have room service, the restaurants were closed, they didn't clean your room. This is the nicest hotel there, so it sucks. So anyways, we wanted to create an experience that we would not, and I'm kind of a hotel snob like you, and so these things matter. So anyway, we got the RV, and it's like owning a boat. It always has these weird little problems. Most of them are my error or acts of God. It's not really the RV's fault. But so far we've been to Utah, we've been to Montana, Wyoming, Idaho. We've been to Texas, and we've been to all over New Mexico and Colorado. So that's all we've done so far.
You were just down in Austin?
Just down in Austin. Yep.
Okay. And
we're looking at ranches down there.
Oh, cool. And then did you go into Austin? What did you see about it when you were in Austin? And I know you've been to Austin many times over the years. How have you found it changing there?
Well, I was, at least the neighborhood we were staying in, it was a lot of college kids, and, people were, and a lot of it's a very outdoor scene anyway. So, with people on patios and, food truck courts and stuff like that. So most people were not wearing masks, and were not making a big deal out of it. And it was very much like normal, actually, like what you'd expect in a normal place. And while even in our hotel, everyone's wearing a mask, and, we just ignored it. Honestly, no one ever said anything to us. It was nice. We had a nice time. I was surprised. I didn't remember all the people in Austin being so overweight, but I guess maybe it was that way, and I didn't. Ryan Dice replied back. I tweeted that, and he's like, "It's always been like this. It's the tacos and Willie Nelson," I think he said.
Well, we just got back from Nashville, and Nashville was party central there for a lot of people. Like the bachelorette parties were going, and people were on the trucks and partying in the streets. So it was pretty normal there.
Yeah, you definitely are finding a little bit of both of those. Sometimes where it's very, very normal. Like in Austin, actually, it felt very normal. In Dallas, it felt very normal also. And
okay.
When we were in this little town called Gauss, like right outside of there, it's weird. Like everybody there was wearing masks and everywhere they went, and it was a little strange.
Huh.
Strange. So it can be, it's really kind of all over the map. I think people are getting tired of it though, and I think it's the effectiveness of our health experts is wearing off.
Yeah. So you lived kind of close to Denver. Has Denver seen a huge population growth, and why are people going there of all places?
Well, I think it has, like a few other cities have experienced this too over the last decade, and over the last decade it has. But there's been a lot of people looking to get out of the major cities where they had no access to the outdoors. I mean, places on the East Coast that were so locked down, so restricted for so long, where you don't have an apartment that's very big, and being stuck in your apartment most of the time. I mean, you're basically in prison. It's basically in prison. So there has, I don't know the numbers actually in Denver, what the population growth has been, but this has been a destination city really for the last, like Austin, for the last decade or so. So that definitely seems to have continued.
Did Palantir move their headquarters to Denver?
Yep, they have an office here. A lot of these tech companies have moved some facilities here.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And then so that then raises the home values and pushes people out to the outskirts even more. I guess that might work for some of the bigger companies downtown.
Yeah, I'm sure it would have to. I mean, the housing prices are already pretty outrageous here, I think, anyway. And they've only been across the country. They've been going up, actually, except for in these pockets like in Manhattan where people are trying to get out.
Yeah. Do you remember our friend Rich Desich?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. So he was down here. He was passing from Puerto Rico, where his father has a home, and he was passing through Miami on the way back to Ohio. And he said it's Cleveland and Columbus have had a huge growth, and the number of people that have moved from New York State to Ohio is massive. And I never would have thought that, but even like people from New York City have moved to Ohio, to Cleveland.
Oh, I mean, that's weird. This is very strange, but also I get, like, people just like, they want out of these very, very restrictive places that are also incredibly expensive to live in. So you can get, especially if you can do remote work, you can have a dramatic boost in your standard of living, and you can have the quality of life increases that are also very big. I mean, in New York with everything closed is like, I mean, it's like hell. Well, yeah, exactly. New York, it's a vibrant place with lots of stuff happening. You get lots of serendipity walking down the street and seeing these different stores and cafes and stuff, and finding these little local neighborhood places. Like, that's what made it great. But it's been so run into the ground. Honestly, it's just it's reaching its end, I hope.
Yeah. So you do a podcast with a gentleman named Doug Casey. You started this, you guys are doing like 110 episodes now, and sometimes you get 3 or 4 or 5 a week. Tell us who Doug Casey is, why anyone would want to listen to him, and some of the things that you've discovered in your conversations with Doug in the last few months, which have been a wide range of things, of course.
A lot of things. So let's see. Doug Casey is a speculator who's made a fortune on mining stocks mostly. He's an economist. He is a best-selling author. And, as one of our viewers said recently, he is a god among men. I mean, he actually is he is the wisest human I've ever run into. His knowledge of so many things is incredibly vast. And yet when you're talking to him, he's asking questions. Like, it's the Socratic method, with him always. And he's non-confrontational, and he just doesn't, some of the things that we discuss on our channel, we think are eventually going to get us in some trouble if our channel gets big enough anyway. And
like trouble with YouTube, and like,
yeah,
all of a sudden it will no longer exist.
Yeah, exactly. Which is fine, because Doug's like, I'm old, I'm rich, and I don't give a damn, is kind of what he said. So anyway, so I got to know Doug over the last 15 years, and I was reading his stuff before that. It really changed the way I thought about stuff. And I'd had these private conversations with him, several dozen times that I always got a lot out of. these conversations I'd have with him. And so, when he's kind of he was stuck in Uruguay, and because they were under really severe lockdown. I mean, he's on his big ranch, and it's like the world is nothing changes for him except he doesn't, go into town as often and meet friends. But, it's like, well, why don't we just try this and just see if we can keep it interesting enough that you'd want to keep doing it, because I think it'd be useful for people. So my goal with it is just simply to share the type of conversations I've been having with them over the last decade, but to share them broadly with everybody, because I think that it's a damn travesty that more people don't know who Doug Casey is. Although he is pretty famous among certain groups, he's extremely famous. So things I've learned from it. The conversations ranged from political to economic to philosophical. And there isn't a single one of those conversations I don't learn something from. If nothing else, Doug has his memory is shocking. His memory for weird historical facts is a lot like your memory for dates. It doesn't make any sense. Like, where does that come from? But you could just pull this date out of your head. So he could do that with these historical facts and philosophical facts and literary facts, from things he's read 30 years ago, and he can just bring it. And so that, talking about today's events within some much grander historical context, it just makes everything he says more vibrant and real and understandable.
Got it. Now you guys joke that you guys have the Doomsday Show now, but recently you have a conversation with a guy named Jeff Berwick, and he's a little more optimistic. And you've had a couple of people on there that are more optimistic. What are some of the shocking things? Or actually, let me ask you this: you mentioned on the show that you underestimated how far certain organizations, maybe the government, maybe the Twitter mobs would go in, and maybe how far they would go and how fast they would be able to accomplish their goals. What did you mean by that? And then what are you doing because of that?
Well, I've been a political cynic for a long time, but I think that I specifically have not been cynical enough with that. I didn't. I felt like it was mostly theater, but I feel like it's all theater at this point. And I feel like that the information that is out there, even the stuff you see in the headlines, like, here's one example. People were talking about how great it was that where you are in Florida, the House passed a bill that banned vaccine passports. So no company, no government agency, and no school could require vaccine passports in the state of Florida. Okay. At the same time, in that bill, if you actually read the fucking bill, which no one reads anything, it also allows state health officials to force vaccinations on any person they deem is a threat to the overall community. So they can force vaccinations now all of a sudden in the state of Florida. They were not able to do that, but they can do that as a part of the bill. But of course, the headline is, well, there's no vaccine passport. So you won't have to show your papers. Well, why would you when everyone is forced to be vaccinated? I mean, when that is the power that they have in the law, and there's exceptions, of course, about the use of these vaccine passports. So anyway, it feels like you just assume that some people are kind of representing people still, like that some of our political leadership is actually out there representing us, but they really aren't. I don't think that a single one of them actually are. It all feels like theater. And, the acceleration of these mandates, the travel restrictions. I mean, I have my assistant update every week this list of travel restrictions and the use of vaccine passports around the world. And it has never been reduced. It has only been accelerating this entire time while people think things are getting better. And I think I started to see this larger plan. Seems to me to be a plan. And it's much bolder, much smarter, and more ambitious than I'd imagined. So the first thing, though, that I would say, though, that really made me think that, and these people are really smart, is that as someone who's done some marketing in the past, I just think the marketing is just so fucking good. It's so good. These people are so good at marketing. Like, if you think of, if you ever studied in NLP, one of the key things in NLP is that people have these automatic records they play in response to any stimulus that they see. So something happens, then they have this pattern of thoughts that runs through their head automatically. And one of the great ways to sort of shape someone's thinking is you hit them where there isn't a pattern. It could be a set of words, a set of questions, or something that just, there's no pattern for them to respond to. So it just hits their brain, and there's no antibody response to it, is a good way to think of it. So like the phrase Black Lives Matter, for instance, that is a phrase. There is no, because everyone's like, yeah, of course, yeah. You know, I mean, no one has any, there is no one disagrees with that. And yet, yeah, but here's the whole Black Lives Matter agenda. We're against the nuclear family. You know, we're going to take in billions of dollars from the largest corporations in America. And, you know, for what, who knows? And, you know, and then you see this critical race theory stuff showing up. It's impossible when you have kids in school, you could see that it's so difficult to get the curriculum changed in schools. And yet at the start of this school year, starting in August of this year, so all the Black Lives Matter stuff was over the summer. So in that year, there's like the Black Lives Matter stuff was in all the curriculum. It's in the curriculum on the first day of school for my son. And of course it was over Zoom, his high school experience, you know, over Zoom. You know, the principal's wearing a BLM t-shirt. His language arts teacher is wearing a BLM t-shirt, and his math teacher opens it with a PowerPoint slide of her political heroes, which were the Obamas and this local guy here who's, you know, just been charged with sexual assault. But yeah, whatever. So yeah, so it's like anyway, this is it just like. Well, and you see that, and then you see people who are setting cities on fire, nobody doing anything about it. Okay, but if you try to defend yourself, you would be the full force of the law would be thrown at you. So when you start to see these small state prosecutors, these small local prosecutors letting people off, small meaning that they're not national figures, but across the country, essentially letting off people who are actively engaging in crime, letting them off, no charge. Meanwhile, throwing the book at people who basically try to defend themselves. You're like this is planned. Like this takes a long time to get all the people in place that are going to be okay with this. It's abhorrent to most Americans, honestly.
Yeah. And so you and Doug talk about the question always comes up, and it's always so disappointing that you guys don't have an optimistic answer for this, but it's like, you know, people always say, well, Doug, you've traveled the world, Matt, you've traveled the world. And so, you know, where should we look to, you know, maybe carve out a place to go? And Doug doesn't have anything, and you're kind of, you know, a little bit unsure as well. And so here we are, we've all got to go somewhere, you know, move to a place where, maybe not move to a place, but at least it'll find our group of people that we will support ourselves with in their communities. So what are you doing? You know, you mentioned you're traveling to Austin, and are you looking at Texas? Or are you looking at other places?
I have two plans. One is a U.S. plan, and one is an international plan. And so I have been looking at ranches and farms here that are highly productive, have highly diverse crops, are maintainable, you know, and productive, and that have multiple structures on it. So I could have, you know, me and my family and my friends and anyone else. There'd be plenty of room to add on to that. So that's what I've been looking at, actually, is stuff that like that in the U.S.
So you have a checklist almost that needs to check certain number of boxes. Okay.
Yep. And this is like, you know, and because I could totally be wrong about all this, by the way. You know, I could totally be wrong that it's going the way that Russia went after the Bolsheviks took a charge in 1917, or it could be totally wrong that it's like, you know, the French Revolution with the Jacobins took over. But I don't think so. I don't think so. There's no sign of it. The indications are always just that as things don't work, there's a doubling down. Just to give you an example, do you know that last year was the greatest expansion of personal income in American history? I think I might have told you this fact already.
I think you shared the graph of it.
Yeah. So the numbers are out for March now. Okay. Now they're way up again, but 34% of all personal income in the United States is transfer payments, meaning it's welfare of some sort. It's stimulus payments, it's UBI, it's unemployment. Like more than 1/3 of all personal income in the United States is at that level now, which that on an annualized basis is $8.1 trillion given to individuals by the government a year. That's that rate. If you annualize it from March, now it probably won't be that for March because we had those stimulus checks that came out then, but still it's shocking. So the dependency, so we have an economic problem that we have not even begun to deal with. We've just been covering it over by spending 20 extra trillion dollars in the last 18 months. So
and then you showed another graph, and our friend Bobby Casey showed it. There's 11 states where there are more. Is it true that there are 11 states where there are more people on welfare than working?
Exactly. Yep. 11. And that number is only going to rise because.
And one of them's California, which is a lot of people. It's more people than Canada.
Well, Illinois was on there too. I mean, which is a huge state, the population there,
Ohio, Kentucky, New York.
Yeah. So how does this work? How can these be functioning societies when that's the case? They can't. And so anyway, we have all of this economic baggage that was here even before this last 18-month period where we've just doubled down on all of it. And it had to be reckoned with at some point. And I just feel like it's going to happen. There's going to be some economic problem that's going to lead to greater consequences, even if this vaccine passport thing doesn't come to fruition, which I think it is, actually. I think it will happen. It does. I think it's going to lead to a central bank digital currency. I think they have to be connected together, actually. These two things seem to go together in my mind. And then, and then I think the fact that you have, I don't know, like I'm a conspiracy minded person, but I don't think I'm a conspiracy theorist exactly. But when you have the World Economic Forum coming out saying you own nothing and you'll be happy, that seems to be the way we're going. I mean, people haven't had to pay rent or mortgage payments in most of the United States for 18 months. So personal incomes have gone up a lot, by the way, and expenses have technically gone down dramatically because no one has to pay that they can't be evicted. What happens to those landlords? Well, eventually they're going to be foreclosed on, so the property is then going to be owned by some government entity. It's just, anyway, it's not economically sustainable. So you have to have you have to be in a little bit of protection mode for yourself if you have assets right now. Plus, when Biden comes out and says, again, the rich not paying their fair share, all this crap where, I pay more in taxes than I pay in everything else in my life put together. But not my fair share, apparently. And I think that you just gotta, I don't want to earn any income anymore. I want to have no income. I don't need it. Fuck it. I don't need it. I just don't want those bastards to have it because it's just punitive anyway. They're printing up all the money they need. Why should they be taxing anyone at all? They're taxing only because it's punitive. Yeah, to punish people.
It's interesting. So I spent a lot of time with, a couple of groups of entrepreneurs, and a lot of guys are really into multifamily real estate. And so I'm walking around, knowing what you tell me, and then I'm walking around these, many of these individuals who are incredibly optimistic about multifamily real estate, but it just seems like, it's a test of, as F. Scott Fitzgerald said, it's a test of my intelligence, because he said this quote, and I want to talk to you about the optimism versus pessimism debate that might go on in your head, that might go on in all of our heads. But F. Scott Fitzgerald said, the test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposing ideas in mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function.
Yeah.
So help me on this one. Maybe I'm not a first-rate intelligence, because I do hang around such optimistic people, and but I want to look at the opposing views. How do I function and not get paralyzed? You're a little more skeptical, but Jeff Berwick and you and Doug were talking, and he was very optimistic, and maybe it's not one or the other.
Jeff Berwick is optimistic, but expecting 1 billion people to die.
Oh,
okay. So he goes, people who are the idiots, the zombies who line up for vaccines, whatever. Yeah, good. Let's get rid of them. So yeah, he's optimistic, but not in exactly not in a Pollyannish way.
Right.
Okay. So it's, he just has a great attitude about it. So I just think that, there are things that comes down to defining what's in your control and what's not in your control. It comes down to that we live in a highly distorted economy, And so there can be things that happen that are shocking. Like, I mean, Doug and I, were expecting this to be the second part of the Greater Depression, that this was after 2008 was the first part, has just started. And then this was going to continue here. But, by watching the way things evolve, we're like, no, I think we're having a crack up boom is what it's called, where basically, everything goes up. Like, it's like everyone's feeling super rich and, we're going to spend more money. Prices of everything are going to go up and everyone's going to feel richer. And then there's going to be some sort of a collapse. And we are seeing that crack up boom now. We're seeing it with real estate prices. We're seeing it with asset prices. We're seeing it with the increase of travel, at least domestically. Again, like you're telling me in the Denver airport that it was the busiest you'd ever seen it when you were here.
It was unbelievable how busy it was.
Yep.
And here in Miami, there's a bar underneath where we're staying that has a lineup starting at 5 o'clock every night, 7 days a week. And then I see people coming out of there at 6 a.m. And I just, I look at these young people and I say, what could you possibly do for work with your neck tattoos and all?
Why would they need work? I mean,
right.
If they used to be an Uber driver, they can collect state unemployment plus a bonus from the feds of $350 a week. Okay. Plus, you get, if you have kids, you get these child tax credits, which they now pay on a monthly basis. It used to be like when you filed your tax return, you got a credit for it and you could get, that's how people would get a refund who never paid taxes. But now they actually pay you monthly, like at the UBI. Plus they got $1,400 the other day. There's all kinds of money that's coming people's way that's new. So there's so much money flowing around and so much credit flowing around. But this is a classic crack up boom is what it is. And so you can
have we ever experienced anything like this in history, or at least relative to it? Because obviously they weren't giving out money. They weren't giving out money in the 20s, but they had roaring 20s. Is this somewhat similar to it?
The Mises described what happened in Weimar Germany as a crack up boom.
Okay, so after the First World War, in the early 20s.
Yeah, when they started printing all this money. Yeah. And, just people felt really rich, but there was also obvious inflation that was happening. Mm-hmm. And they ended up collapsing in and of itself. And it was said that you could buy, all of Mercedes-Benz, the company, for like the cost of 1,000 cars or something, or 500 cars or something like that. The company's value had crashed to an extent that, their monthly production was the value of the company, because then, so we'll get to that point. It seems to me after the crack up boom. Before that, everyone's going to feel really, really rich, and we're going to see spending that's going to be crazy. And if you're in business today, you could be doing extremely well. And you and I both know lots of people who are having the best years ever. And a lot of them say quietly, I don't hate to, say that I benefited from this pandemic, but it really has been good for me. And
I don't know too many that aren't.
Yeah. That's because
really
you don't know that many restaurant owners in New York.
Right. Right. I don't actually. But obviously those people are not doing very well. So the question then becomes, and you'll have to look into your crystal ball, of course, how long can it go on? And when it can't go on anymore, then what happens?
Well, my thought is that, the monetary system is super screwed up. So the ultimate end goal is actually to get everybody to get us switched over to a central bank digital currency. Right. And even if you believe that the Feds, the Federal Reserve are good guys who mean good and who are really smart, like if you give them all the best benefits, you could see how this would be in their minds a much better way to operate things. For right now, for them to have put money into the real economy, they have to go through these banks like JP Morgan, because the actual money printing doesn't really happen at the Fed. I mean, it really happens at these primary banks. Okay. That's where the money creation really occurs. And it occurs by them making loans. Now, these banks are not idiots. They know when it's like, hey, things are overheated, we're going to actually increase our reserves, not decrease our reserves. So, because they don't want to go out of business, but it makes it very unwieldy for the Fed to encourage people to spend money during times when, the economy's slowing down. and to discourage people from spending money when it's heating up. But with the central bank digital currency, they can bypass completely the banks, and they will completely bypass the banks. And essentially you have your own account, and they can actually even say, they can see, by the way, every transaction you make, 100% of all of them. And they can deny you even being able to buy certain things. Like like if, you're overweight, and so they don't want you to have McDonald's, so you're not allowed to buy McDonald's. But that's like longer term. Shorter term would be simply this, is that, if they could airdrop money in people's accounts when they engaged in the right behaviors, or when they wanted to get more economic activity going, they could just airdrop money into certain people's accounts. And then for people who are hardcore savers, who just were accumulating wealth, they had more money than they needed and they weren't spending enough, they could start a negative interest rate with them. So it actually costs them to keep the money in the bank.
Yeah.
Or you could even do things like, here's money, but it expires next Thursday. You buy something next Thursday or it expires. And so like, if you want to encourage economic activity, so that's what I think where it gets to. But I think people aren't going to accept that completely until there's a fundamental breakdown. And I think, it's possible that they can, keep this going for another year or so, with it, to keeping just spending more and more money. That it's possible, but it's hard to see it going along for too long, honestly.
And then in terms of the technology they need to apply a digital dollar in the United States, what do you think the time frame is for that?
Oh, technology's there. They've been testing it I found white papers from 19 different central banks in January of in December of 2019, that they had from all the testing that they were doing on it. So they were looking at it way before this pandemic stuff. The hard thing is that to get it in people's hands, they need a verifiable digital ID on every individual. Like, they know it's you. It won't work without that, because the money because they want to trace the money from point A to point B, know exactly who has it, exactly what they're buying with it. And they can't do that unless they have a permanent digital ID, verifiable biometric ID. Well, how do you get that? Vaccine passports. We've had 100 million people are fully dosed on the vaccine. They're going to be very supportive of the idea of everyone having some proof of a vaccine with them. And now that you got that, it's tied to your thumbprint or tied to your facial recognition. It's totally biometric. And, that's easy enough to put a wallet tied to that too and deliver it that way. So I think the technology is definitely there. It's definitely there already. So it's just a matter of distribution. And I think the distribution is the vaccine passport.
All right, so let's switch from there. That's fascinating. Give people a lot to think about, and switch to where a lot of this money seems to be going into something that I know you're a little more optimistic about, which is cryptocurrencies, such as Bitcoin and the other 9,000 coins that are out there. So just a quick background. We've had Mike Dillard on the podcast, and he did explain Bitcoin and the foundations of it. Let's just have you talk about, why you think that this is a place to put your attention if you have the capital.
Okay. So there are a lot of different cryptocurrencies, and some of them deserve more consideration now than others, I think. Bitcoin is the gold standard. I bought Bitcoin very early, twice, and lost it.
I remember in 2012, we were in Japan, and you told me you lost some Bitcoin, and that was the first I'd ever heard of it.
Yeah. And that was but I lost some more later when I bought some on Mount Gox, and then, they was a scam. So I lost mine there too. But, I started so I was kind of like aware of it, but not that interested in it until late 2016. And in late 2016, I saw that there were new capital controls that were being placed on the Chinese. Basically, they didn't want them moving the money in and out of the country so much. And I guess what I'm saying is I didn't see a real use case for Bitcoin at that point. But then I see the Chinese implement these capital controls. And then I see a headline where they were criticizing Bitcoin because 70% of the activity was happening in China. And I go, oh, wait, of course, they're trying to get their wealth out of the country in the only way that they can. And Bitcoin is the way to do it. right now. So it made perfect sense to me. And all of a sudden I go, okay, it's a way you could transfer value across time and space. Like that's a valuable asset. So, it was like around $600 then. So I started buying a bunch then. Ethereum came to my attention shortly thereafter. I bought Ethereum at $8 initially. I bought more many other times later, but I think it is in a world. I mean, I think we live in a world where most things are actually fake. I think most businesses, especially the businesses that are super successful, are fake businesses. Like it doesn't matter. Like profits don't matter. Profits can hurt you if you're trying to go public and you're actually making money. Well, they can run. They can run some realistic projections on it, and so of course it hurts your valuation. If you're not making any money, then it helps your valuation. Anyway, it all seems fake. The markets seem fake. Like, how is it, Hertz files for bankruptcy and then their stock goes way up? I mean, that doesn't make sense in a real world. So the real dynamics of markets we're not seeing that anywhere, except for we still, for the most part, do see that in Bitcoin. Now they didn't, and the reason for it is because there's not this overall financialization around it. There's not all these other tools that people can have to short it in the way they've been able to do in the past, and it makes it more volatile. But a market should be more volatile actually than what we're used to. I guess we're used to like just these straight lines almost going up. It should be more volatile, and that's how real markets often function. So you do see with Bitcoin, and definitely in 2017, I felt like you were actually dealing with a real market, like totally legit real market. Now it's like it can be manipulated a lot more because of futures contracts and stuff like that, but it still is a real market. There's real limited supply. So you have a lot of value in the world, all this excess money that's out there, and people want to own something where their wealth is not going to be destroyed. And, that's traditionally been gold. And I think gold still is. I think gold is probably the most undervalued thing in the world today. And I think that will change. But still, Bitcoin often, does a lot of the things that gold does even better.
So if someone was listening to this and they've heard me interview Mike and then they've heard, us talk about it and they're still not sure how to get started, like how would you tell a beginner to go and get their first $500 worth of Bitcoin?
Well, a lot for the super Bitcoin crowd, this is like sacrilegious what I'll tell you, but go and open a Coinbase account, which is a highly regulated financial institution that will definitely track everything you do. That will, but so does Wells Fargo. And you open an account there and you can buy it there easily, $500 worth of it. And one of the things that I think this major misconception that people have is they think, well, I don't have enough money to buy a Bitcoin. It's $57,000. No, you don't have to buy a Bitcoin. You can buy 1/1000th of a Bitcoin. That's a great thing. It's divisible to multiple decimal points. So you can have $500 of it. In fact, 6 months ago, like I after trying to get my family to buy it for years, I finally said, listen, if you'll open a Coinbase account and buy $100, I'll give you $1,000. I'll give you $1,000 of Bitcoin if you can just go buy 100 of it. Because once you buy 100 of it, you're going to see it and you're going to watch it for a while and you're going to go, oh, okay. You're going to start to see how it acts in price and see how it really works. And then you'll become more knowledgeable over time. So I resorted to pure bribery with all my.
So I read the recent thing. There's like 9,000 coins. How do you like this? This could drive somebody crazy in terms of if they got into Bitcoin, they got into a bunch of other things. How do you allot your time to watching cryptocurrencies in general, and where do you draw the line?
Well, I mean, I don't spend a lot of time on it. I'm not a trader, and if you're a trader, I think it makes a lot more sense. You have to stay up with it because you're basically just trying to follow the trend. You're trying to buy in, at a lower price, sell out, hedge your bets. I mean, but I've never been that trader guy. I've always just been, I believe in the long-term idea. So I stick with the long-term idea. And, that has served me very well over Bitcoin for these last several years. And, and then Ethereum was interesting because it was fundamentally different because it enables these like automation of activities online. Like it eliminates like the contracts essentially and lawyers necessary to make sure that when something happens someone is paid. Like it really offers a whole operating system, I would say, or protocol they might say,
and that's what people call the smart contracts.
Yeah Yeah, so I have Ethereum for that reason. Ethereum hit a record high today, I think, of 2,800.
Oh, wow.
My Ethereum position, which was very small, is now pretty substantial. It's probably more than, it's probably 15% of my overall crypto portfolio
Okay.
at this point. So it's become pretty substantial. So I think look at the big ones like that, and then I think there's one other area that I think so as a preserving and transferring value, Bitcoin works. For the technology value that inherent in smart contracts, I think Ethereum is definitely the winning horse in that race right now. And these network effects, the way it works, it's just they just get more and more power the bigger that they get. So I think betting on them is probably good. I could see Ethereum being 25,000. That seems possible.
That's good because I think I have like 30 of them.
Good. Good. And then the other ones are the privacy coins. Now, what people people think that with Bitcoin, you can, it's private, it's secret. You could send Bitcoin and people won't know. Not true at all. Not true at all. The analytics around the tracking of these things, it might not have your name tied to it, but they can track back the origination of a token and its hands it passed through, and they can definitely figure out, if you're doing something that they don't want you to be doing with it. So the great thing about a good money should have a privacy component to it. I mean, you should be able to go and pay cash for a Diet Coke at a 7-Eleven and not have anybody saying, hey, what was that what was that $2 you spent for? It's like you should just be able to do it. And the anonymity you get with cash is going away very quickly. And when you go to all cryptocurrencies or central bank digital currencies, it'll be completely gone. But so there are a couple of really promising privacy coins. The one that's been around for a while is Monero.
Yep.
Monero, which I think is very interesting. And then there's a new one that, and I say new, but it's been around for about 2.5 years now. So it's had enough time to prove it's worth a little bit. And it's called Pirate Chain. And its symbol is R. R. I mean, it seems like a joke, but the thing is, a lot of libertarians like pirates. So, for the libertarian idea that it's like there's something nice in it. And I took a position in that, and that's gone up a huge amount. And it's been but it's just it's just a belief that there's going to be value for private. People are going to want private things. They aren't going to want everything to do to be public, all their money to be public. And so things like that give the opportunity to have some of that.
Now, just in terms of using Bitcoin, do people have to convert it to something like Monero, or like what's Tether, and then is there a USDC one, and like that's pegged to the dollar somehow, and then also like what's BitPay? How is that? That's not actually, that's using Bitcoin to pay for things, and I've heard that you can do this at some stores, but is that actually using Bitcoin, or do you have to transfer your Bitcoin to money or something? I'm very new to a lot of these smaller things.
Well, Bitcoin is money, so you don't have to transfer it to money for it to use it as money. But not everyone accepts that currency yet. Just like if you had a bank account of Japanese yen, you couldn't necessarily buy anything you want from any place in the world with the yen. I mean, they're gonna want a currency, their local currency. So in a lot of cases, still you do have to go to the U.S. dollar. But you have these things called stable coins. That's the USDC, and that's basically designed to mimic the dollar, but not actually have to use dollars in order to transfer value across borders. Because the risk of people say, well, the problem why Bitcoin isn't a currency is because its price is so volatile. So it has to be stable in order for it to be a useful currency, and you can't price something in Bitcoin. And because of that lack of stability. So the idea of these stable coins is to essentially mimic the dollar, but not really be the dollar, and then allow people to transfer value across borders. And Tether is a similar concept used by banks. I don't know. There's Tether is probably one of the more controversial things in crypto. Like there are people who believe it's a giant scam, like a complete scam, and other people who believe it is the obvious way forward. I mean, it's so ideological. I've honestly stayed out of really even consideration for any of it because it just seemed crazy to me. Anyway, the other thing is that, Bitcoin has a finite cap in it. And this is what people have to understand, is that there can only be, I think it's 22 million ever mined, ever. For a pirate chain, there can only be 200 million mined ever. And it's that natural cap is a key critical piece on a cryptocurrency if you actually expect it to be a store of value of some kind. Now, with Ethereum, it's not capped in the same way. So there can be an unlimited, essentially, number of them. Not exactly, but much more so. And so that makes it so that it's not really designed to be a currency. It's much more designed to be a utility token, essentially, to allow these smart contracts and all these other software programs essentially be built on top of them. But BitPay is a service. It's like a merchant account that basically allows you to receive payments in cryptocurrency. So you could set it up on Early to Rise, BitPay, and say, and it'll allow people to pay you in Bitcoin or Ethereum or a suite of others, actually, that they will allow payments in, and they will collect it. They'll collect a fee, and then they will convert it into US dollars and deliver it to you. Or I think you can choose to have it stay in an account with them in the cryptocurrency. And I mean, more and more people are starting to accept it. You can buy a Tesla with Bitcoin.
Yep.
So, and that'll be a bigger deal over time.
So you and I have an author that we like, Nicholas Nassim Taleb, and he believes, at least from what I understand, he believes that Bitcoin is a Ponzi scheme. Have you heard him say that?
I have. And, he owned Bitcoin, up until recently. I don't know if you know that.
No.
So he did own it. Yep. And I mean, there is some, there's some truth to it is that everybody who owns Bitcoin is publicly encourages everyone else to own Bitcoin. And by that encouragement, the value of their Bitcoin goes up. Mm-hmm. That's true. So, am I promoting a Ponzi scheme by bribing my family members to buy Bitcoin? In a way I am, because I want them to have exposure to it as a safety net. But the truth is that the more that they get into it and others get into it, the more the value of my current Bitcoin goes up. So in that regard, he's right. I mean, it's not nearly as big of a Ponzi scheme as Social Security is, but it's like, it's definitely, it has some characteristics to it. It's not though, because the biggest difference is that with the Ponzi scheme is that you're not using new money coming in to pay out profits to the old money that came in. You know what I mean? And that's that's a traditional Ponzi scheme is based upon that idea. You're using basically the new money to pay off the old investors and use the supposed returns that you're giving to the old investors as a way to lure in new money constantly.
Right.
I think
until it catches up with you, but it's not like there's no catching up, I guess.
Well, the difference, I guess, the harder thing about this, there's two places where the Ponzi scheme metaphor breaks down. One is in that the old money being used to pay for new money returns. The second thing is that it is not something that is driven by it is controlled in that there's a certain amount of supply of this asset that it really can't ever be any more. And if you and the more people that want to own it, the more expensive it's going to get. I mean, you have the largest fund focused on the space, Grayscale. They, at last report I saw, which was 2 months ago, they were buying 100% of the new supply of Bitcoin that was being produced each day. So one company was buying 100% of the new supply. PayPal also was buying something like 50% themselves of the new supply created that day. So the demand, it's just, this is why I'm saying it's more like a real market, because there actually are true supply and demand dynamics that are driving the price upward. And the biggest thing is because our fake money world is making people be more speculative. I mean, looking for ways that they can protect their wealth, and they can bet on things that are more speculative in nature generally, but they just can't get returns anywhere else.
Yeah. And anybody can buy it, and anybody can buy a small amount of it. And, anybody can, just with a phone and an app, and away you go, and anybody can get it right away.
Yep.
So,
and I think who has a portfolio anybody with a portfolio who does not have like a 1 or 2% exposure to cryptocurrencies is an idiot. I think it's just a terrible mistake.
Because it's it's an asymmetric thing. So actually that brings me to the $500,000 Bitcoin, so I'm listening today, our mutual friend, Bobby Casey, put out a podcast, and he thinks in 3 years from now, Bitcoin will be worth $500,000. When do you think Bitcoin will be worth $500,000 a coin?
I mean, I don't know if it'll ever be worth $500,000 a coin, to be honest. I think that's if you look at the patterns, the way it's grown in history, I mean, you could make an argument that it's going to go through another crypto winter after we get a blow off top at some point, I don't know, at the end of this year, the first quarter of next year. I mean, that's what the pattern would be like. And then there's something that causes it to collapse, and Bitcoin collapsed quite a bit before, if you remember, from 2017 highs, 20,000 down to certainly got in the 3,000s. Everyone, it washed out everybody who wasn't a serious Bitcoin believer, basically. That has to happen between now and that 500,000 again. I just don't see. So why that it's possible that number could be achieved. There's going to be a big washout between now and then. If you can't handle that washout, then you have to, that washout might only bring it down to the levels it is today, honestly, because it could go up to 200 and then come back down to 50. And then people who bought at 200 are going to feel like they got crushed, and they did get crushed. Right. So, but yeah, I think it's possible that there's going to be such fundamental changes in the monetary system between now and 3 years from now that it won't be possible for it to get to 500,000. Honestly, it's possible. So I think you're going to see a greater explosion. I think that, Doug was asking me this, and I'm like, I've been watching Bitcoin through like 6 of these cycles, and I think you got, it's like, are we close to the top? I'm like, this looks like more like a wall of worry climbing versus a top, when it got to like 66 a few weeks ago. And I was just like, I just can't imagine it doesn't get to over 100 in this cycle. But that a lot of people have started to move some of their cryptocurrencies into these privacy coins. And I think that you're going to have huge Bitcoin gains that get exit and get into these privacy coins. So I think that those have more growth potential, I think.
So did Talib liquidate all of his Bitcoin, or he didn't move it to other coin? Or
he said he just said he sold his Bitcoin. That's all he said. My guess is he liquidated.
And he liquidated based on the morality of it, or?
Oh, it went from not. No, because he'll speculate. Jesus, the shit that guy's bought in his life. There's no ethics in any of these Wall Street financial instruments where he made all his money. There's not ethics involved. It's just, it had a huge run up from 10,000 to 50,000.
And that's when he sold.
Or between 40. So, it was a big run up. And guess what? I sold a little bit at that same range too, because it's like, this is a lot of extra cash that I didn't expect to have. I'm going to take a little off the table because I don't want to be disappointed if it goes down tomorrow. I want to make sure I have plenty of room in my portfolio to hold it for as long as I feel like it should be held. And if I don't take profits along the way, then it'll be hard.
So he's now in the opposite of the Ponzi scheme, where it doesn't actually benefit of him if it goes down, other than in reputation. But now he speaks to say that it's a Ponzi scheme, and so if it does go down, it just puts a smile on his face. Well,
and I do think the idea of his metaphor for a Ponzi scheme has some merit, and I think he wouldn't argue that. I think what the headline that comes from the things he says about it is that it's a Ponzi scheme, but there's a lot more context to that. I think that he would describe it basically as that everyone talks about it. Everyone does these stupid laser eye things. I start seeing that shit and I go, I feel like it's a top. It starts to feel like a top when people are doing that. When people's number one thing in their profile is Bitcoin, when you have people who don't know anything about anything promoting Bitcoin, it just, it kind of makes it hard to be associated with it.
Well, I think I did tell you this, but one day when I visited you in Denver, I was a little flummoxed when I heard the construction worker telling his other construction worker friend that he was putting all of his money into Bitcoin, and they were sitting at Whole Foods eating lunch. That construction worker at Whole Foods eating lunch is enough, let alone, and this is not like a high up guy. This is a young guy. So, he was giving the investment advice, much like the old fable of, Rockefeller getting the tips from his taxi driver or whatever. So last question on Bitcoin and crypto is, what could destroy it? Quantum computing? Could China destroy it? Could the government actually set up a term where you can't do transactions in Bitcoin? It seems like the horse has left the barn on that because of all the Wall Street companies involved in it. But could any of those things actually lead to it being very devalued?
Yeah, I think they're all possible. Quantum computing fundamentally can break the encryption. And when it comes, you'll hope that there's a new standard, a new encryption standard that Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies could have that would make it so that it's not hackable so quickly, so easily by quantum computing. But the computing power present in that would break it. I mean, it could beat everything else. So that's an existential threat to it. That's probably not a couple of years from now threat. That's probably something in the future. When it's more valuable and more worth it as a target, first of all.
Got it.
But plus, you have to be careful with doing that, because if you attack the network to try and get some value from the network, then if it's known it's been attacked, then the network loses value automatically. So it has to be done carefully, or by a state actor who is really trying to kill it. So I think the more likely scenario, though, is that you have this 1933 FDR Act passed, or executive order, that makes owning gold illegal, owning gold personally illegal. So they didn't make it so that the banks couldn't own it. They made it so individuals couldn't own it. And what they did is they said you have to turn it in, and the market price of it's $20, and we'll give you $20. So you give us your gold, we'll give you $20. You give $20, then we have the gold. Right after they did that, though, and a lot of people don't even know this happened, but this did happen. This was the major form of money in America was gold. Historically, it was gold. It was not anything else. It was not these paper dollars or anything like that. It was gold. FDR made it illegal for you to have gold, and it was a criminal offense if you had it or accepted it or used it, and people went to prison for it. Wow. The Secret Service was set up to go after these people. Okay. There's lots of stories. If you look back then, headlines that they were scaring the hell out of people to turn it in and to make sure that they were complying with the law. Then right after that all was happened, and, basically the gold had basically been collected, they devalued it. So they made it so the gold, an ounce of gold was now worth $35. So they took the gold, and then they also took half your money essentially along the way by changing the exchange rate right after they had all the gold. So they totally screwed a whole, I don't know, every person in America who had their savings, and the only form of reliable savings you could have, which was gold at the time. So I could definitely see a scenario like that again, where, you can't regulate Bitcoin, but you can't control it, but you can definitely regulate it, and you can make it very hard for people to accept it, or for people for it to be known that people have it. It's easy for it to be known that people have it. Okay. So this is one of the big reasons why people like these privacy coins. So I could see a day where maybe it's $100,000 Bitcoin, maybe it's 10 million of Bitcoin. I don't know, where they say, okay, we'll give you our central bank digital currency in exchange for that, fair market value, no problem. But if you don't do it, then we will hunt you down. We will assume that you're involved in nefarious activities. We'll put you on the no-fly list. We will do whatever we have to do to punish you for not turning it in, which is just scare most people to just, to turn it in anyway. And then at that point, they can devalue it however they want. So once they control it all. So if you assume gold is where the value was before, if you assume Bitcoin, if you're a Bitcoin maximalist, that Bitcoin is going to be where the value is before, state actors are going to want to wrest as much control over that Bitcoin as possible. And
they just you can't imagine that any country is happy that everyone is now doing stuff in Bitcoin. We're taking back control of the money supply. That's not going to end well for people who don't get to control the violence at the same time.
Exactly. Controlling the money is everything. It really is. It all comes down to the money. was it Rothschild said, I said, I don't care who writes the laws, it's just who controls the money or something like that.
I think it was something like that.
Yeah. So that's definitely true. It's definitely true. So controlling the money has enabled us to, it's really destroyed the wealth of, the middle and lower classes in America, made it impossible for people to, to grow wealth. It made it much harder. It's obviously not impossible. I was poor. I managed to put together a few dollars here and there. So it's possible, but it's much, much harder, especially if you're doing all the things right, like saving.
Yeah. So, interesting what you said there about, they'll eventually they could eventually just turn the screws on you so much that most reasonable people would be, well, I've weighed the pros and cons and it's not worth it, which is what they probably will do with vaccine passports. And it'll be, because if they say you can't go to a sporting event, I don't care. If they say I can't get on a flight internationally, that hurts. If they say I can't get on a flight domestically, if I can't come back to the United States once I go to Canada, if I don't have a vaccination, you pretty much got me, and you've forced my hand. If they do that, do you think that you'll go from Texas or wherever you find your ranch to somewhere else?
Well, I think the vaccine passports are absolutely coming. I don't think there's any doubt about that. So I just, that's why I have an international option that I'm working on as well.
There you go.
The international option still is required. It will require you to be trapped there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just part of the deal, at least until the dust settles with all this. Maybe sanity returns. But I just feel like it's, the thing is, this biometric identity is everything. It's not like carrying this yellow fever card that you'd get to go to visit Tanzania years ago.
Right.
Not like that. This is something that it's not just a random piece of paper. It's a digital biometrically accessed ID that's being issued by Walmart. I mean, Walmart's doing it even. It's crazy. I mean, it's not like it's, I don't know.
So then you and Doug always say that all of these things get much, much worse. And then, obviously some incident might happen and then things will one day get better. Do you have any optimistic words to leave us with? Not that it was too pessimistic today. I mean, it's certainly none of this stuff has come to pass yet, but we should prepare for things. But any optimism to leave us with?
A lot of this stuff has come to pass so far, actually.
Yeah.
I don't know. You've seen governments behave in draconian ways, almost in a universal lockstep matter all around the world. I mean, that's weird.
Yeah.
Here's how that
well, actually, so my parenting advice thing is, like it would seem crazy then for me to go and Michelle and I to go and have kids, but we're going to. So any parenting advice is, as we have kids in this new world. I mean, parenting advice is probably already hard enough or being a parent is already hard enough, let alone when we're dealing with many unknowns, unknowns.
I think that having kids today is the greatest act of courage one could possibly engage in, because it's a vote for the future, and everyone is nihilistic at this point. I mean, people see, which I heard this great definition of nihilism. It's when destruction is seen as progress. And I think that's like the vibe that we see that's everywhere around us. And you cannot have that when you have children. Like you can't, because there is a future that is, you want to exist, and you want to make sure it's as good as it possibly can be. So my optimistic view in all this stuff really is that I think that we have gotten, people like you and I, Craig, have been very easy for us to sort of skim a level above the surface of engagement with life in many ways. You know what I mean? Because like traveling a lot and like, just like we could just, with our hotel snobbery, with whatever, we could just like, we're just kind of no deep roots necessarily. Lots of people that we love, lots of connections that are all over the place. And it allows us to like not be forced to engage with like our neighborhood or our neighbors or or family as much or any of those things. And I think that so many, I feel like that's not the natural state of man at all. And the only way that you or I may really seriously consider doing what the things that might, I think, give us the greatest of fulfillment we could actually get in our lives is to be forced to do it. Because I'm not sure because it's just too easy to just skate above all the difficulties of life. I mean, we have a little bit of financial success and like, you can do it. You really can.
It's almost like being flaneurs or whatever the Talib calls himself, and Hemingway was supposed to be, just kind of
like a bon vivant.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's great. I get it. And I love it. But I also think that the richness, the depth, the roots of life can be lost in all of that. And, and the idea of thinking about having kids and thinking about even multi-generational households, like what's lost because we have lived in such an atomized culture now where we're so separated from one another. I mean, everything is about an individual and that individual's performance, regardless of, their family, their neighborhood, their friends, their whatever, what I mean? It's everyone's atomized. And I feel like that's not how humans are. I believe we are all connected. And I believe that we've lost touch with that completely. And that, we've talked a lot about fate and predestination in our past conversations. And, I believe in predestination. And I believe that, the universe often whispers in your ear. It says, do this. That's not the right move. Don't marry that woman or whatever. Right. And you're like, oh, no, it'll be okay. You turn away. And then eventually the universe picks up a brick and smashes you over the head with it forcing you to really realize what reality is, what you're really dealing with. And I think that all this stuff is a giant brick, and we can take it as a huge opportunity to recognize that maybe we were making some mistakes in our judgments about the way the world worked and, what the best pursuits for ourselves were. And that I think that so just one quick thing. I saw this ranch in New Mexico. The lady who who's lived there for 40 years. She comes from an old New Mexican ranch family, and she has basically been running this thing on her own for the last 40 years. Okay. She farms cattle and sheep, and she's got greenhouses and orchards, and it's an amazing thing. And it's basically just her. Okay. Just her. And she's she might be 70 now. And she is like this. I wanted to see that property mostly because I heard a little bit about her story, and it's so incredible. And I met her, and she's just like super radiant. She plays, all these musical instruments, and she, does all this stuff with all these animals on her own. And she's just like an old farmer, can fix anything. She's a private pilot. She lands her plane on the property, because it's kind of remote, it's just a little tail dragger. And I mean, she's incredible. And this piece of land is incredible. And why is it incredible? It's because this woman as they say in Wisdom of the Sands, she bartered her life for the creation of something bigger than herself. I mean, everything that's there is there because she put it there. And so that there's like, someone asked me, well, how did it feel? How did it feel? And I said, well, it feels like some amazing woman dumped 40 years of love into the place. That's what it feels like. It feels fantastic. And, there is that possibility in life beyond just simply skimming above the surface. And I think you and I it's just path of least resistance. We would have felt like idiots if we didn't do that before. But now I think we have a chance to consider other things. We're being forced to consider other things. And I think I really believe it's for the long-term good. I really do.
Well, I like that. I think that's a great way to end this conversation. We have so many more conversations to come. Things are going to change rapidly, and I'm always going to you for your perspective and your advice. So I look forward to talking about that again and hearing about the progress you've made on all of your preparations.
Thanks, Craig. I appreciate it. I love you. Talk later.
All right. Controversial. I'd love to hear your questions for a future episode with Matt. And in the meantime, you can follow him on YouTube at Doug Casey's Take. That's where he's interviewing his mentor. All right, we'd love to hear what you thought. Drop it in the comments down below or send me a message on Instagram at Real Craig Ballantyne. We appreciate your support. And hey, listen, we'd love to hear your questions and your negative feedback if you don't agree with us. All right, just drop a comment down below.